Welcome, everyone. Looks like everyone's filing in. Hopefully, everyone is staying cool as much as possible. We were all chatting about it. The four of us happen to be in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and we're doing our best to survive the heat. So, hope everyone else is doing as well. All right. And welcome today. We have a very timely discussion on partner satisfaction and surveys that Leopard Solutions and SurePoint have done, as well as Major Lindsey in Africa have done previously. My name is Flora. I head up sales for Leopard Solutions, which is part of SurePoint Technologies. We have Laura, who's going to be presenting the findings from a survey that we did back in the spring of partners from both mid-sized and large firms, and talking specifically about equity versus non-equity partners and the tiers. Been a number of topics and articles written on the subject recently, so it's very timely. And we also welcome Sarah Van Steenburg and Bryan O'Leary from Major Lindsey in Africa. Sarah, you want to just introduce yourself real quick, and then you, Bryan, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks, Phil and Laura. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I am a managing director for Major Lindsey in Africa, and I sit in the DC office for the firm, and I work both in the partner practice as well as our board services practice.
Thanks for having us today. My name is Bryan O'Leary. I'm a market analyst with Major Lindsey in Africa. I'm attached to our New York office, and I lead our research initiatives for both in-house practice, the partner practice, associate. I really runs the gamut. So I'm our resident data nerd.
Well, I'm going to pass it over to Laura. She'll share some insights from our survey that we did, and then we'll let Bryan and Sarah shine some insights and some perspective from the surveys and what they see in the market following that. So take it away, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to call attention to the fact that Major Lindsey in Africa also does a partner satisfaction survey and a partner compensation survey. This survey is a little different because we wanted to get information about mid-sized firms, and I really wanted to get information about non-equity partners too, and information about how everybody felt about the non-equity tier. So I was at a conference with a lot of managing partners, and I happened to make the statement that I had spoken to several folks who were in that non-equity tier, and they weren't that happy about it. And it really ruffled some feathers in the room, let's put it that way. And I thought, I have to find out more about that. I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about, and I want to get some answers from partners about how they feel about it. So we designed sort of a far-ranging survey, and we're going to show you some of that along with some other information that we've compiled over time. So let me share my screen with you. So we did this survey very recently. We had over 400 people answer that survey, and we're going to be talking about the results of the survey and just our own perspective of what's going on in the market with partners in top law firms, mid-sized law firms, and that non-equity tier. So partner satisfaction is a broad and evolving topic. And we set out to explore a sort of a specific area, and that's that growing non-equity partner tier, particularly outside the ranks of the largest firms by revenue. And although this tier has existed for nearly 50 years, it has recently seen some significant expansion and is now a major force in reshaping the legal industry. And to provide some context, this is a really great article, and there's a short, insightful video that breaks down key trends and developments. And one of those is this chart. So according to the article and data from the American Lawyer, with the current trajectory, there will soon be more non-equity partners than equity partners among the top gross. Divide will only continue to widen. And that is because it pays, and pays the equity partners handsomely. Their data showed that most non-equity partners make about 1/3 of their equity holding counterparts. Not surprisingly, they are not that happy about it. The sharp rise in adoption was largely driven by the remarkably effective strategy employed by Kirkland and Ellis. The rationale for introducing a non-equity partner tier is very clear. It allows firms to retain promising young attorneys by granting them the prestigious title of partner, and that title also enables higher billing rates than those of associates. At the same time, firm leadership benefits by excluding non-equity partners from the profit-sharing pool, preserving more revenue for equity partners. The structure makes it easier to boost profits per partner, which of course is a key benchmark of success in the industry. In our 2024 survey of corporate counsels, we saw that value was the most important factor when selecting outside counsel. It's why Leopard Prowess was born, to help corporations find legal talent they might otherwise miss. The value piece poses a very interesting question. Are companies happy about paying partner rates to attorneys who are a partner in name only? Companies are employing multiple cost-cutting strategies right now. They are looking for ways to find more value in the market. As billing rates continue to rise, will more ask about the equity status of the partner that they're working with? This article posed a downside to non-equity partnership, and that is the lack of retention in this tier. Among the 84 lawyers in the 2012 class of those promoted to non-share partner, fewer than 40% remain at the firm, and only 14% are publicly identifiable as equity partners, according to a Bloomberg Law analysis. Bloomberg compiled 10 years of data on Kirkland non-share partners. Among the 2009 class, only about 20% remained at the firm. Kirkland may have a seemingly endless stream of attorneys who want to work with them, but not all firms could be that lucky. Law firms risk losing non-equity partners if their compensation doesn't clearly outpace that of senior associates. At some of the top firms, senior associates can earn $575,000 or more, including bonuses. And in many cases, that puts their compensation on par with or even ahead of some non-equity partners. And firms are responding to this in different ways. In some structures, non-equity partners earn amounts comparable to high-performing associates. In others, depending on performance metrics and firm-specific models, non-equity partners can earn as much as or even more than some equity partners. So the key takeaway is this: if firms want to retain talent at the non-equity partner level, they must ensure that compensation reflects a meaningful and well-defined step up from the associate ranks. In our State of the Industry webinar and white paper this past January, we had reported on a shrinking middle in partnership in 2023, right? And in 2024, that cohort shrunk again, with now just 33% of partners within that mid-tier level. Now, this middle tier is critical to firm growth, revenue generation, and succession planning. Those who are exiting are likely not equity partners, but are in the non-equity partner tier. If we look at the partner mid-level group, you see that 24% of partners who exited a top 200 firm returned to one. 10% exited to other law firms, 3.8% to corporations. Well, all that means is that 76% of mid-level partners who left a top 200 firm did not return to one. They went somewhere, but it wasn't back into an AmLaw top 200 firm. 83% of the next group, age 52 to 60, did not return to a top 200 firm. A LexisNexis survey of UK law firm leaders mirrors much of what we have discovered in our own surveys and data. 71% of law firm leaders believe loyalty is declining. 63% of large law firm leaders believe associates are less interested in making partner. Only 25% of associates want to be a partner at their firm in the next 5 years. 75% of associates plan to stay in private practice for the next 5 years. 71% of associates said work-life balance is the most important factor when job hunting. Now, our Gen Z survey and white paper came to the same conclusion that the LexisNexis survey did. Younger associates are not as interested in making partner at their firm if the partner model doesn't change and offer more work-life balance. There are many that would like to be partner, but on their terms. Would the non-equity partner tier help by relieving some of that pressure? Or would it make it even more unattractive if they require the same amount of work, but offer less compensation and prestige? Now, those associates who want to make partner within 5 years might be surprised to see these numbers. The time that it takes to make partner has increased dramatically for those who join a firm right out of law school. The average time it takes to make partner has increased from 2012 from 3.67 years to 9.4. Laterals entering a firm, of course, have a much faster path, but it too has increased by 1.8 years over time. Right now, let's get down to the survey material and the topics that we covered. There were over 400 responses. The survey closed on June 9th. And we had a split. We had 61% equity partners take the survey, 34% non-equity partners, and we had a 50-50 split between folks at a top 200 firm and folks who are not in that group. And then we had we also sort of split that up by ranking as well within the 200. 72% of men made up the demographics, 27% of women, which is pretty much on par for actual partner demographics by gender. 38% were currently in leadership. 15% had previously held leadership roles. 16% had joined the firm right out of law school. 84% had moved into that firm laterally. 38% had lateraled in within the last 5 years, and 62% had been with the firm for more than 5 years. Now, this is all partners, so the whole group. We asked them about what formal training they had received upon becoming a partner. We said, check everything and all that applies. But as you can see, the largest response was none. None. They had received no formal training when they became a partner. We asked if clients knew their partnership status, and we see that 20% were unsure. Almost 43% said yes, but we had almost 37% say no. We asked about the transparency of progression. The question was, how clearly is the path from non-equity to equity partner communicated at your firm? The highest response was somewhat clear, 27% not clear at all. Only 22% said it was very clear. We wanted to know about the priorities in partnership, and it's not very surprising, but 67% said income generation is very or extremely important in determining or maintaining partner status. 79% said only equity partners have voting power at their firm. We also wanted to see about if the expansion of the non-equity tier had affected firm culture, and they were very neutral on that topic. 28% said it was positive, 15% said it was negative, but 58% were neutral. They just didn't know. We did ask about possibly splitting that non-equity tier into multiple tiers. So you have sort of an apprenticeship or a permanent non-equity partner, and that's all, upfront and transparent. 47% were against it. 21% said yes. 32% were unsure. Now, we segregated out the non-equity partners for a series of questions, and we wanted to know about compensation. So it is interesting that both groups, mid-sized firms and the top 200 firms by revenue, had 38% who were satisfied with their compensation. But then you begin to see the differences. Mid-sized firms with a non-equity partner tier saw higher rates of dissatisfaction and also a lower rate of very satisfied attorneys. So it may not be as easy to transfer the success of that non-equity partner model to this group of firms. Now, here's some insight about why those mid-level firms see more satisfaction challenges. 56% say pay does not reflect their contributions. That's balanced by, in that AmLaw 200 group, 33% say their compensation does not reflect their contributions. 52% of mid-sized firms earn the same or slightly more than senior associates, while 17% earn less. In the AmLaw group, nearly 38% of non-equity partners earn only slightly more than senior associates, but 48% report significantly higher pay. 43% in the mid-sized group received reduced or no performance bonuses tied to origination. The AmLaw group, just 24% received origination-based bonuses at the same level as equity partners. You can see some of the representative voices there on the far right about how they, what they gave us or what they told us how they felt about their job. Now, we asked them to rank the factors based upon, what the impact on their compensation. So first was origination, even though we just saw that they were not being compensated in the same way for that as equity partners. Billable hours, client relationship management, profitability metrics, firm leadership roles, which a lot of the non-equity folks might not be a part of. And then number 8 was pro bono and community work. We asked which statement best reflects your sentiment about being named a non-equity partner. Now, the largest group looked at this tier as a stepping stone toward equity partnership. But if we recall from that earlier slide, only 14% of the 2009 non-equity partner group from Kirkland was found to have actually made equity partner. And that reality did not end up coming to be for many. It did not end up to be the stepping stone that they thought that it might. Goalposts move. There is a perception that non-equity is a long-term position. The mobility to equity is limited. Non-equity partners tend to stay in that role for 4+ years. So their view of the non-equity role seems to change the longer they're in that role, and we see the opportunity to step into that equity role diminishing. 42% said that non-equity partners did not have a meaningful involvement in firm decision-making. And they listed some of their top frustrations. We saw the statistics. These are some of the sentiments behind those numbers: the lack of transparency, the appearance of the lack of value to the firm, that their value being tied to compensation is evident in some of these responses. And now let's see what the equity partners had to say. We did ask what their capital contributions were to buy into the partnerships. Of course, it's very different from AmLaw firms and the mid-sized firms, but those numbers were not surprising. And then we asked, how would they describe the portability of your book of business? 48% said very portable. 42% said somewhat portable. 7% said not portable. We also asked about unbilled contributions to the firm. This is how other ways that they spend their time at the firm. And Does the firm recognize these unbilled contributions? And luckily they did. 66% said yes, they do. And then we asked sort of the 2025 financial outlook. Equity partners are entering 2025 with caution. Only 7% anticipate a capital call next year, suggesting most firms feel reasonably capitalized in the near term. However, a third of respondents report their firms are carrying manageable debt, and a smaller 4% describe it as significant, indicators that some balance sheets may be strained. When it comes to practice areas under financial pressure, corporate stands out, with nearly half the partners citing it as the most vulnerable area. Real estate, litigation, and bankruptcy also rate as key areas of concern, reflecting ongoing market uncertainty. And notably, 27% of equity partners expect de-equitizations in 2025, an indicator of firms actively managing profitability and partner performance amid some tight conditions. Then we just asked to see hotspots. It is interesting to see corporate there at 38 after we just saw it on the last slide as being in danger. It is good to see that they see 55% see the incoming associate class size as being the same as the previous year. 25% said it was going to be larger. And just to wrap up a bit, 2 days ago, the American Lawyer ran a headline that caught my attention: the all equity era, all but over. And if that's true, it's not going to come without a cost, right? Firms are under pressure from all sides right now. AI is reshaping how legal work gets done. Clients are demanding its adoption to help drive down fees. Firms are raising salaries to win the lateral talent war, and they're leaning heavily on the non-equity partner tier to protect profits. Meanwhile, Gen Z is pushing for a healthier work-life balance, making it clear they're not going to settle for the old model. And in the middle of all this, the rapid expansion of the non-equity tier might present more challenges than many firms are willing to admit. It's not just a solution, it also could be a tension point. And it's going to test how firms define partnership, compensation, and long-term value. And that is the end of our data presentation. It's a lot to absorb. Yeah.
Well, good stuff, Laura. Bryan, Sarah, thoughts on what Laura shared and how that might have compare against some of the data you guys are pulling in through your surveys?
Sure. Yeah. And just looking at that, I mean, this rings so true to everything we've been hearing in our own surveys. We've been doing our lateral partner satisfaction survey it's coming up on 30 years now. And the results are consistent that the reason partners move is because they don't feel supported in their practice and for culture. It's not compensation. Everyone wants to make more money, of course, but time and time again, far outweighing the compensation issues are these culture issues and the feeling that they're not being supported by their practice. And furthermore, in our culture survey, we saw both the senior associates and those kind of junior partners saying, we are less satisfied when we feel that we don't like the strategy of management, or we don't like the way the direction the firm is going. And that's why we're moving more than how much money we're being offered.
One of the things that struck me as you were going through the slides, Laura, was one of the things we found in our survey was that equity partners are bringing in about 4 times the load when it comes to originations, right? And you got to factor that in there. So you have this imbalance happening, but you also have equity partners really driving the business of the firm and wanting to be compensated for that. So there's this natural tension that is definitely at play.
But if the non-equity tier is not being compensated the same way that the equity partner tier is being compensated for bringing in business, that could also contribute to that uneven dynamic. If you're not going to be compensated for it and rewarded for it, why would you do it?
It leads to more questions, right? I think that there's also questions as to what are you using your non-equity tier for? Is it to train people to become big rainmakers? What sort of programs and processes are kind of being put in place to support that? Or is it just to keep senior associates there? You know what I mean? What is the goal? I think that if the firm is not clear as to that goal, then you're going to see a lot more dissatisfaction. Absolutely. Bryan, you were going to say?
Yeah, kind of tailing on to that, we asked in our compensation survey whether partners felt they were compensated fairly, commensurate to their contributions to the firm. For equity partners, interestingly, it was only 2/3 that said they were. So we have a third who think they're contributing more, but among the non-equity partners, it plummets. It's down to half. So half of non-equity partners out there think they're doing more work than they're getting compensated for.
And there's a big jump between being an associate and then being someone who brings in business. And
Sure.
how do you ease that transition? How do you get people out of the mindset of being fed and being the people who go out and feed? And I think that's been a long-standing problem within firms, that gap continues to exist. And I think now we actually literally have a bucket for those people, whereas before they could get lost in between the different layers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we've seen that in past presentations and surveys that we've done, especially the work that we've done with women in law, that there is very little training about learning how to get business and how one does it, and even understanding how important it is, right? A lot of associates spend years chugging away at work on their desk without having any idea that any minute now they're going to be judged on how much business they're bringing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's a
that,
wake-up call.
yeah, it goes back to that whole transparency thing. What is the real path to partnership? What are you looking for? What do you require? There are people that will do it if it's just clear and the path is, not a black box, as one of the sentiments was in the survey.
And I saw the question about women. I can tell you with our survey, we found that women's comp has, for the first time in our 2024 survey, went up at the same rate as men's comp, but it's still lower overall, right?
Yeah.
So they were increasing at the same rate finally, which that's new, but still starting at a lower point. I'm curious what you guys found when you dig into the numbers regarding women and even people of color.
Yes, we found the same, that they did not feel they were compensated fairly as their male counterparts. They were not given the same opportunities that their male counterparts were given. So there was a lot of that information. We've done multiple surveys, with women associates and partners, and that seems to be the prevailing sentiment.
Laura, there was a question that just came up, and I know we asked this during the survey about laterals who are equity partners who need to lateral to a new firm as a non-equity partner. I thought we asked how a partner joined their firm, like something around whether they joined it as an associate and then became partner, or they joined it. I don't know if we have that. We have that data in hand, but we could share that later on with the white paper.
There'll be a white paper that follows this with all of this information. But most of the people that answered the survey did move in a lateral fashion. And there were several answers on the survey about aging out of being an equity partner. So once they hit 65 at their firm, they went from being an equity partner to a non-equity partner. And this sort of kept the younger, blood going into that equity pool. And but information about the other fill hopefully will be in the white paper.
Laura, you mentioned non-equity partners not returning to those top 200 firms, and something that jumps out at me is we were looking at the reasons partners lateraled, and 1 in 5 was moving to a less profitable firm. And I wonder if there's something at play there where, non-equity partners at certain firms are moving down to somewhere less profitable to get that equity.
Yeah, well, that very well could be. I mean, I do believe that's who's leaving that middle tier are those equity partners, right? They're the real free agents that can walk out the door at any moment, which is something that firms are going to have to keep in mind as they create this tier. But they're definitely moving somewhere else where the grass is greener and they feel more valued. And if it's to a firm with lesser financials, but they get that equity title and they feel more at home, then yes, that's a great trade for them to do. There's a lot of psychological value assigned to that partner title. I heard on that one of those articles, there was a great video, and Bruce McEwen from Adam Smith Esquire was on there, and he talked about that psychological barrier. If you're a non-equity partner, no matter what your compensation, no matter what you're doing, there's always this thought in your head that you're not quite good enough at your firm. The fact that most of them don't participate in, running the firm and making decisions about the firm leaves them in that outsider sort of feeling. I know there's been some firms that have been trying to give them more voting rights, so they do feel more of a part of the firm. I think that's incredibly important, especially if you want this tier to really survive. I also think the two-tier non-equity system, if you're going to have one, might be a good idea, in that if you're going to be a non-equity partner for the rest of your career and you are good with that, that's clear. That's a clear path. Everybody's happy. The firm's happy. You're happy. But if you're one of those that see it as a stepping stone and that's not where the firm sees you, that's going to lead to an exit down the road, and maybe even a messy exit down the road. We saw how portable those books are, right? A lot of them have highly portable books of business. So if it's someone that you value, you may have to think about if you don't want to take them to equity, then you might think of other ways to keep them at your firm. There are other things that you can do to keep them happy.
I think individually, and I'd be curious to hear what you guys think, Sarah and Bryan, and even others in attendance here. What I've heard is sometimes the non-equity, and I think it spelled this out. The non-equity tier can be a stepping stone individually for an attorney, right? So if you're at a law firm for a lengthy period of time, and maybe you don't see a path to partnership at your firm, you might be motivated to move to another firm, as we see in the data. There's a shorter period of time, obviously, for them to become partner. Maybe they become non-equity partner there and then bounce to another firm to become an equity partner. It could almost be like a stepping stone in their career as they move around. So I'm curious if you guys think or agree with any of that.
It depends. We've definitely seen, like at Kirkland, for example, some of those non-equity partners have $3 million book of business and they're still considered non-equity, and the path upward isn't clear at their firm. We're able to move them into an equity partnership elsewhere, partly because of the Kirkland brand and the assumption of excellence in training, but then also they have developed a book. Those same, at that same firm, the non-equity partners without a book, it's very, very difficult to make that move, right? It's all, they may have to move especially if they're an 8th year, because you can make non-equity partner as an 8th year, you may move over as a counsel. But if the path upward is more clear, and, in that process, we're having those discussions to make sure that everyone's expectations are properly set. We know what we need to do, what the candidate needs to do to not only meet, but exceed those expectations. It might make sense to kind of move over as a counsel somewhere else if the path is like kind of laid out for you and you see, true opportunity to make that equity tier. I wonder too, back in the day, people used to pass their books along, equity partnership. When you welcome someone into that partnership, that was also sort of part of your making that status, was a sort of handing over from one generation to the next. And I wonder, by kind of separating those tiers, if that responsibility to pass along has been diminished somewhat. I think we see some of that, absolutely, with people being more reluctant to exit the firm, or even some of those partners who have hit retirement age, they can swim downstream with their books. They don't have to, stop practicing. And we've seen that happen quite a bit as well, as opposed to pass it along to the people they've been developing. There's less likelihood of that happening, and people really have to build from scratch, which is a much harder proposition than it used to be.
Yeah. And that also could take part in the elongation of the path to partnership, right? Yeah. If they are not passing along and helping them up in the way that they once did, they're hanging on longer, they're keeping their business longer, they're keeping all of their tradition and not passing it on. That could be one reason why that path to partnership has grown so much. I also had shown that to a gentleman at a firm who said they took that chart, that long path to partnership, and we also had rates for people who, of course, looking at the difference between people who came out of law school and people who came in laterally. They said they found that the people that came in from law school asked fewer questions, didn't ask for as much help. They weren't as vocal, so they didn't get that help. So the whole lateral track, kept going into partnership, while those others did not. And it's also telling, I think, that the people who answered the survey, very few of them came in from law school. The
Yeah,
large,
homegrown.
all laterals were all
Yeah.
laterals. Yeah.
I think we're going to see in successive generations, like I'm Gen X, and I think people feel for like as though they're free agents. And I think you go down to Gen Z, whatnot, they feel even less, as if the loyalty to the firm really exists. And we've seen people who are homegrown, whose comp is not where it should be because they never did leave the firm. They never went to market to find their true value. And the firm, because their firm has been worried about losing them. And so we'll talk to candidates who feel, it's all about that appreciation. And I don't think money is the answer for all of these things by any stretch. And I think firms focusing on that are missing some of the other pieces that they could be utilizing to retain and attract top talent. If you are a non-equity partner, but could have more work-life balance and actually see your kids, I think you would keep a lot of people. So
Yeah.
I think thinking about it, this on only kind of this, we're in the ball game, everyone's a free agent, and we've got to just throw the dollars at them. Let's raise our tiers, blah, blah, blah. I think you're missing sort of the change happening business-wise with the generational shifts that are actually happening within these firms and what people really are valuing and care about. So and that leads to innovation, some creative thinking around your talent, which AI is already pushing, but I think could help foster a different sort of, human capital environment in these firms. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to happen whether they want it to or not, because the market demands, right?
Yeah.
And this whole generation is demanding. And
Mhm.
there will be changes whether they're prepared for them or not.
True.
Yeah. And there was a question just came in about non-equity partners complaining of receiving W-2s instead of K-1s. There was actually 2 lawsuits, I think within the last year and a half, with a non-equity partner suing the firm after they left because they felt they were miscategorized. I was not a partner at the firm. I was an employee of the firm. Even though my bill said partner, I was not partner. So all of that needs to be very clear. They need to be classified correctly, paid in the correct manner. But and if they're not, there will be more lawsuits like that, I think, in the near future. It's very clear that they have to be classified correctly, but it is kind of a shell game, right? They're called a partner to the world. They say they're a partner. They charge the partner rates, yet they're not really considered that partner by the firm, like an equity partner. And at some point, there will be clients question that. Why am I paying this rate to someone who's not really a partner at your firm? You're calling them a partner. They're not really a partner. There will be those questions. Just like, are you using AI? I want to see my bill go down. Why have an associate do that when AI can do that job and save me money? And there's lots of questions surrounding that legal bill that goes out, because sometimes it's shocking. It's shocking.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
they really are looking for multiple ways to save money, to save cost, to find that value that they're looking for. And there'll be some hard questions about that. A lot of folks are unaware of how much this non-equity tier is growing within law firms. And I think there'll be some hard questions to answer at some point about that for their clients. Yeah.
I think the tough part about a partnership is that the people who are most benefiting from the status quo are the ones who have the power to change things. And so you really take some long-term strategic thinking and some sacrifice, honestly, in the equity tier to be thinking about these kind of bigger issues and longer-term problems. And but I think you're right. It's going to be thrust upon them. Better to be out in front of it. But I think that's why partnerships are just notoriously difficult to move and change and bend. They're just not as nimble as other types of, business models, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of big businesses are not nimble, let's face it.
True
And then,
that. True that.
and then you've got all these partners in the firm that have all their different thoughts and perspectives, but getting them to think beyond this year and next year is one of the most important things that they can do, because they really do have to sit down and grapple with the changing world around. Yeah.
But I did think it's striking that so many people made partner and they had zero training for that new title. Unlike business, they do put the money in to kind of career path and succession plan. And so I do think there's definitely a moment there that can, a place for real change to happen that could be very beneficial for this non-equity partner track. That's an easy get, I think, for a firm to put some training. This is a 3-year gig. Here's the training we're going to have. And you could easily build a program around that for that. So I found that striking in the data that you shared.
Absolutely. And of course, and just the lack of transparency. So you've got folks signing up, to be in this non-equity partner tier, or an associate just looking to make partner. The black box surrounding it, what they need to do to get there, what metrics they need to hit, what do they have to do without knowing that? How does anybody make partner? I don't get it. They really, and it's just transparency. And knowing what it is. If they don't know what it takes to make partner, then they should sit down and write it down and figure it out, and then share it with them, because they may find a larger group of people stepping up to do a lot more stuff that's going to benefit the firm overall, whether or not they actually succeed and make that partner tier. But it gets people going, it gets them excited, it gets them shooting for a goal, and you're going to get better work out of them. So I don't understand the benefit of keeping it secret, when I think there are so many pluses in being transparent about how they can succeed at their firm.
I'm so glad you called that out. In our most recent culture survey, the idea of compensation transparency, when we asked them about what inspires the most negative feelings about your firm, compensation transparency jumped 8 places from the previous survey to second, right behind profit-mindedness. So, and I think that coincides really interestingly with this rise in the non-equity tier. People want to know more about how decisions are made. And I think that ties in directly to the idea of value. When you feel involved, when you feel like part of the decision making, when you're at least informed about the decision making, you feel more valued, you feel more likely to say you are more satisfied. That aligns nicely with our compensation survey, where those in open, transparent systems were more satisfied with their compensation, no matter how much they were making.
Yeah. Well, feeling valued in your job by your peers and by your bosses is incredibly important. If you don't feel valued, you're not going to stay. So they all have to reckon with that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think one of the reasons why it's such a black box is there is a bit of an alchemy, because partnerships are naturally political places. And if you've had a really strong practice group head, you may have been shielded from some of those politics until suddenly you're kind of thrust into them once you become promoted. I mean, I saw that one quote you had about everything's political. It always was. You just maybe didn't realize it, right? And so I think part of firms figuring out how to make things more transparent is to really dig into that alchemy. And maybe part of it's also looking at the leadership. If you have a strong practice group head that really develops their talent, then you have someone who's kind of, even as an associate, you're learning really the ropes of how to create an internal brand and an external brand and all of those things that you really need to be a successful partner. But if you don't have a strong leader as your practice group head, or one who develops other people or shares that secret sauce, you're really at a loss. And so I do think even just looking at the leadership of some of these practices and what that entails, and maybe that should also be tied to comp as well, would be very helpful and kind of buffeting some of these sense of, not feeling appreciated, or like the shock of, oh, wow, there's a game here. I don't know the game. I've just been working really hard and getting really good at what I do. That's a very shocking thing.
It is. It is. A lot of surprises along the way.
Surprises.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any other questions. You guys want to do like a last round of insights? I thought what was interesting in the survey was what we see looking ahead, the practices that are at risk and the ones that might be opportunistic. Any final words, Sarah? Do you want to kick things off?
I think that we were saying as we talked before we got on this call, I just think this is a moment where there could be a lot of innovation. This sort of all these tensions happening within the firms, all this change happening, these existential threats that are new. I think this is a moment where people could be more creative and innovative and maybe look at their business a little bit differently and maybe get closer to your clients who might be doing things differently within their business that can be very much transferred to the law firm setting, using that as a way to get closer to clients, quite frankly. So I just think that there could be this is really interesting data, but I feel like we're at the beginning innings, and I'm so curious to see what will come of this and what sort of innovations firms will take to kind of address these bigger issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we joked that, or I threw out that line that since COVID, it's been multiple years within each year, right? Things change super quick these days, and you have to be nimble and you have to be reactive while also still being thoughtful and looking ahead and trying to stick to the goals that the firm has. It's difficult. It's not easy, but yeah, but the ones that can navigate it can do pretty well. Bryan, any thoughts? Any final words?
I mean, I think it's just as you said, those who can navigate the changes ahead are the ones who are going to do well. And those who keep in mind that, despite all the changes we're seeing, that there are people behind it. There are people behind your business. We see Gen Z coming up and they have very different priorities. And so the needs of retaining talent and attracting talent will change. And those firms that acknowledge that change and change their business accordingly are going to be the ones who bring in that talent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah, Laura, any final thoughts?
Well, I think the one danger sign that I saw was for not everybody's Kirkland. And if you are going to start a non-equity tier at your firm, you really have to be careful and thoughtful about how you do it, how it's presented, what the future is for that person, because we saw the dissatisfaction levels at mid-sized firms with that tier. So I think there's a danger for everybody jumping on that bandwagon without really thinking through the best way for it to happen. So I would just suggest caution for people who are, getting ready to adopt that and to make sure they do it in the most thoughtful way possible.
Awesome. Well, great. Looks like, let me see, one last question. Yep. So this was recorded. We will be sharing the copy of the recording back with the folks that registered for the webinar. There's also will be a little write-up on the survey that we performed. Bryan, I know you mentioned you're about to start I guess this year's version of one of your surveys.
No, I appreciate the call out. Yeah, we'll be launching our latest edition of our law firm culture survey. That should be fielding next month. So keep an eye out.
Awesome. And we appreciate everyone joining. Stay cool. And hopefully, like anything else, this heat will pass. So take care, everyone, and enjoy the day.